All right, it is time for some more Khuresh lore. We've got two new drops, and I'm a little late to this one, unfortunately, with all of the Total War Troy releases, Humankind and whatnot, so I apologize if you've already kind of dived into this, but we're just going to quickly cover the two new units from the Khuresh fan project. Remember, guys, again, this is a fan project and there is no monetary anything attached to it or anything like that. Please, Games Workshop, don't shut them down. But today we're going to be covering these two new units in the same fashion that we always do. I'm going to read the really cool lore blurb here, and then we're going to jump into the illustrations by both Ruo and Cobol Yu for these two very interesting monstrous units. These are going to be two very characteristic ones versus the previous ones. I think the last episode was a little bit calmer on the unit front as far as their overall aesthetic. These guys are a little bit wilder. So let's go ahead and jump into this. And as always, guys, if you're enjoying this type of content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of fun action. It always helps out any content creator you do watch. Well, let's get started here on some lore of Khuresh. We'll start with the Makor Fang Launcher, like I was saying, and you can already see the picture here, but we're going to jump into another version of it that's a little bit more blown up, and we'll take a look at individual portions of it after we go through the lore. So we're going to be doing this low tech as always, and ignore the big huge ads by Google Blocks here and there. I keep getting advertised for weird hentai stuff, and I haven't watched hentai in like 2 days, so I don't know why I would get that advertisement, okay? So let's just kind of go forward here. So this is for the Makor Fang Launcher. The first and most commonly seen of the Naga created war beasts, the hulking amphibious Makor, or Makara, inhabit the long coastlines and river systems of Khuresh, often found around wetlands, estuaries, and shallow continental shelves. As large as the stegodon, the Makor is a chimeric hybrid of an elephant, merworm, and magus cone, the latter being an exceedingly toxic ocean-dwelling snail related to the so-called pain snail of Lustria. Originally bred before the Great Cataclysm to contend with the mighty reptilian war beasts of the lizardmen, the Makor has proven a dependable asset in the serpent Naga forces over its millennia of service. It pulls the sea barges for amphibious assaults and carries war machines on its back. Its booming elephantine bellow, regularly heard throughout the hinterlands, has struck fear into the hearts of many elves and men. During intervals in between conflicts, herds of Makor are compelled to labor on the snake men sanctums, hauling masonry with their bulk and prehensile trunks. The favored mount of most Khureshi leaders, its likeness is commonly depicted on pillars, murals, and statues throughout the peninsula. The Makor has adapted to the largely warpstone-irradiated environment of Khuresh, though at the cost of a slower birth rate. Its tough, pebbled hide is covered with a layer of slime that protects the creature from heat, as well as staggering amounts of poison and disease endemic to the hinterlands. The Makor has a considerable appetite, as its body requires the extra mass and energy to quickly regenerate battle damage. Vividly colored spined fins run along its sides, serpentile tail, and leonine clawed limbs. The Makor is omnivorous, but prefers a diet of meat, indicated by its wide, saw-toothed maw, reminiscent of that of the merworms. While the Makor has inherited the venomous bite of the merworm, the creature has an even deadlier form of venom delivery. Like the elephants of Ind, Araby, and the Southlands, the Makor bears a muscular prehensile trunk, with which it can manipulate objects. In this case, however, it is also a proboscis housing a large retractable tooth that can quickly form the trunk's secreted enzymes. This tooth is hollow and barbed, attached to the tip of a radula that is loaded with venom from an attached organic bulb. Through powerful muscular contractions, the Makor can inject its enemies with this envenomed tooth, filling them with 100 different neurotoxins. In this way, the Makor defends itself from the gargantuan predators of the sea. The harpoon swiftly regrows within hours as the Makor gets nourishment from its feast. The Naga have learned to coax the trained Makor into impaling inanimate objects with their harpoons so they can be harvested as ammunition. Toke craftsmen load the barbed javelin-sized spikes onto the portable bolt throwers. With rope made of Naga hair tresses, the Fang Launcher bolt thrower is mounted on the howdahs of the Makor. The elevated height allows the snakemen operators to fire the Makor's toxic harpoons at enemy formations and monsters from a longer range, all while smashing through enemy formations and fortifications. The marine turbinid abyss marga boasts one of the largest menagerie of these creatures. Since the creation of the vortex, their blood naga queen have bred Makor with mutated whales and sea beasts that inhabit the far sea. Warped by the power of chaos, these beasts of 5 storms are host to an array of bizarre mutations, including large antlers, long tusks, or in rare cases, wings for limited gliding flight. A skilled monster acquisition team of House Van de Coopers had once attempted to capture the exotic Makor of Khuresh, knowing that the Imperial Zoo paid exorbitant amounts of gold to those who can acquire the rarest of specimens. On their ship's return journey home from a trading mission at Cathay, the captain of the Richter had spotted a sluggish Makor covered in warpstone-inflicted wounds around the western hinterlands coast, and decided it would be the best opportunity they had to catch it. The crew of the Richter managed to subdue the beast and confided it within the hold of their vessel, losing nearly half of their number in the process. As their ship approached the coast of the Southlands, however, a strange noise emanated from within the hold. When the crew went to check, they were horrified by what had occurred. The Makor had mutated and slipped its bindings, becoming more serpentine but retaining its elephant-like head. When a rescue ship of elves from the Fortress of Dawn came upon the Richter, they found her terrified captain hiding within his cabin and barely clinging to his life. He recounted how the creature attacked and devoured everyone else aboard before it leapt off and swam towards the coast. This story has given rise to the Groot-slaying legend, leading to numerous sightings of the beast by old world trade ships, particularly those from Marienburg, navigating along the southern coasts of the Southlands. And here we have that Makor in all of its glory here by Cobol Yu, same gentleman who drew all of the awesome illustrations we had for Cathay, and Ruo Yu, who is going to be the other gentleman we'll talk about in a second, who made a lot of other Cathay illustrations here. But you can see that this thing is extremely characteristic, right? Like, look at, you can see the merworm influence, you can see the elephant influence, you can see all these different things across this monstrosity, and it is awesome. And I really like the angle, right? When you take a look at the Howdah and how it's designed and everything, seeing this in the game is, you can almost kind of see this as an actual concept art for like a 3D representation across like a Dreadsaurian body with merworm things attached to it and so on and so forth. So it is really interesting to see this thing brought to life in this light, as it is so easily, to me in my mind, a one-to-one into Total War Warhammer. But taking a look at some possible mechanics here, I definitely think regeneration would be one of them. Aquatic, or if you had the ability to see how it's got the little wings here, so if it had some sort of middling gliding ability, giving it Strider, obviously causing terrors, siege attacker, all the kind of usual tropes you get from a large monster like this. What would be interesting too is if it had some sort of innate physical and missile resistance as a result of the slime that covers its body. So, okay, hey, it gets these bonuses. As a result, it has lower melee defense or maybe lower armor because of that, because it relies on, say, static resistances versus actual hard defense like melee defense and armor. I think that would be a different change to what we typically get with these larger beasts, which have stupid high armor and really low melee defense, so on and so forth. But as a result, I think it could have very high speed because it kind of has that from the lore we've talked about, how it moves very quickly. And I think that would kind of make for a different monster than what we typically get, right? Otherwise, we're looking at essentially the Khuresh's Dreadsaurian. And that's almost kind of what the lore kind of makes it out to be. This was made to fight the large beasts of the Lizardmen. So it'd be cool if it had a different dynamic than just simply being a carbon copy. Now, the big thing here is the cool harpoon, right, that we get here on the trunk, and you can see it replicated right there, right, the same style of harpoon, which is really cool. I really enjoyed that little bit. So, obviously, poison attacks are going to be coming from this bad boy, and I think that one thing, I say this all the time, but I'd like to see more reactionary effects in Total War Warhammer. And you see this with a lot of other RPGs. Hey, you attack something and it does damage back to you. And I know this is a strategy game and not an RPG, but I'd like to see that added into this. Like the Shield of Thorns should have been that way, but instead it increases physical resistance and AP damage. I think that's the combo. So it'd be interesting if, you attack this thing, well, now you're poisoned because of the slime on its body. And this little harpoon, we know it's replicated right here, and these guys can shoot the harpoon further. So it'd be interesting if there's an activatable for the actual elephant itself. Elephant's kind of a loose term here. The beast itself that allows it to shoot this one. And it's a smaller range, but because it's kind of coming from like a more natural organic projectile, maybe it has a higher AP damage, or maybe it has whatever it has, right? It's just so maybe a way just to do quick burst damage, whatever it is. And from the way that the lore described it, maybe this only regenerates, like the cooldown on it will only go down if it's in combat. So it'd be a real interesting way to get a really cool burst of damage in a shorter distance than the actual bolt thrower on top, which is another point, right? This is a bolt thrower, so it would have maybe two different styles of shot, or maybe you can have one shot that is simply like, rather than it having a burst shot where it shoots a whole bunch and then the single shot, you've got two different single shots, and they maybe do different varying amounts of damage or different types of damage. Because we got like warp stone infused options here. You could do poison, so on and so forth. So this is our big beastie here for Khuresh, a beautiful construct, but the next one is terrifying. Let's move over to our next unit for Khuresh, and that is the Soma Mind Creeper, one of the weirdest concept arts from this team that I've seen, and I'm stoked to go into the lore with you guys. So let's just kind of scroll down here and get right on into it. And a little with a different zoom here, so I hope you guys like this a little bit more. So at a cursory glance, the ominous Soma looks like a massive jar of snake wine, or medicinal tonic sold in some southern cities of Cathay and Nippon, affixed upon a grimly decorated floating platform of sorcerous construction. A large, mutated serpent, tentacles sprouting from its snout, and various body cavities drifts and coils within this vat of formaldehyde-colored fluid. Rippling currents of black-green or black-purple energy illuminate the vessel from within, indicative of its occupant's frightening power. Though no vocalization issues from the vessel's occupant, the telepathic Soma serpent's words rip into the mind and remain there as agonizing thoughts for the listener. The Soma were once an aquatic strategist caste of snake men, advisors produced by the Naga Queen of the future Emerald Delta Marga, who inhabited the great networks of flooded forests and swamps in the eastern regions, named after her and trained to excel in mind alteration. After the pact with the ruinous powers, they were immersed in the liquefied soup of a Slan mage priest in a fell ritual, taken from the corrupted pool of its conquered temple chamber. When these serpents emerged, their bodies had atrophied, rendering them virtually immobile on land. However, they had attained formidable destructive magical powers and telepathic cognitive abilities. The process had also removed their need to feed on flesh and made them radiotrophic, nourished by the warpstone suffused atmosphere and the fell winds that blow north from the meteorite grounds of the southern hinterlands and the southern wastes. The Soma are afforded a special level of respect within the hierarchy of the Snake Men, as the Blood Naga believe them to be a form closer to ascendance at the end of their millennia-long search for solutions to the great questions. They are invaluable to the Serpent Naga's experiments for their conditioned loyalty, photographic memories, rapid information processing, and prescient insight into knowledge that even the Blood Naga are not wholly privy to. Their magical prowess and ability to tear into the minds of others makes them useful interrogators of particularly willful prisoners, elementals, and spirits. Centuries ago, the Soma were painstakingly housed in the corrupted barays of the lost city of the Old Ones and some other capital sanctums, with Naga queens and Panaga chieftains journeying from all over the hinterlands to consult them on matters of war or research. From these static locations, the Naga found that the Soma also provided valuable security. The Soma could detect the presence of intelligent beings and magical entities for many miles, alerting the Naga they served of all who ventured near their sanctums and temple laboratories. During sieges, the Soma discharged long-ranged energy shots, radiated paralyzing seizures, called down unnatural storms, and bound the weak-willed within proximity to do their bidding. With their protection, the lost city and the home sanctums of other Blood Naga queens became all but unassailable. As the Snakemen took their wars across the world during the Stranglehold, the Serpent Naga came to miss the awesome power of their sedentary assistants. When the Empire of the Elves and the early human kingdoms of the East attacked Khuresh in retaliation, the Soma once again proved their worth with lethal precision. Efforts were put in place to find a way to render these serpents mobile yet practical in battle, along with a convenient source of magical sustenance. A chance meeting with the clan scryer Skaven expedition, lost on its way towards Cathay, held the key. Through interrogation and persuasion, the Serpent Naga found that the Skaven were able to draw energy contained within Warpstone and channel it into advanced arcane devices, giving their ramshackle contraptions motive force. Though the Blood Naga had managed to cobble together their own war machines derived from Old One technology and their own research into chaos, they did not wish to squander the opportunity to absorb more vile knowledge. Nervous Ratman envoys were sent back to their clans and eventually returned with select warlock engineers and master molders in return for an enormous amount of warpstone gathered from the southern jungles. Thus began the project that would see the Soma join the armies of the serpents on the battlefield. Although sabotage and betrayal were mulled over by some of the Skaven during the construction process, intense pressure from the clairvoyant Soma and chilling Blood Naga dissuaded any serious attempts. None of the Skaven representatives that collaborated with the Naga returned from their sojourn to Khuresh, their minds devoured by the first of the Soma vessels as they rose from their mooring deep in the flooded chasms of the Hinterlands. The Council of 13, content with their caches of warpstone with fewer rivals to contend with, were disinclined to pursue the matter. Full locomotion was finally achieved with the vat technology of the Skaven, as the Soma were placed into liquid vessels dubbed the Fadraya shells, crafted from exceptional hardened warp glass that could withstand the impact of mundane projectiles and swung weapons. Filled with the waters of these defiled sacred pools, the vessel was connected to a mechanism that would periodically infuse the liquid with fresh warp fluid, nourishing the occupant. Unencumbered by the biological constraints of the body, the Soma could commit themselves fully to levitate the vessel it lay within far above the ground. The devolved Toki's thrall skinks were compelled to partake in the construction process and would later be responsible for maintenance, sometimes to also be used as components. From then on, the Soma were able to accompany the serpent armies as living artillery and magical foci, ensconced within specially designed floating platforms bedecked with root wiring, ornamented channeling pillars, supplicatory offerings, and sacrificial corpses. On the battlefield, the Soma exudes baleful energy that weakens any nearby mortal creature, deteriorating them from inside out if they remain within the vicinity for too long. It can pinpoint weaknesses and fatigue in enemy forces, broadcasting the information into the minds of surrounding snakemen. Enemy warriors that stray too close are paralyzed by telepathic seizures or are cursed by the stored agony of past victims, manifesting physical damage upon their bodies. Coruscating blasts of pure chaos energy char distant foes. Incoming projectiles have their trajectory distorted. The flow of the winds of magic deranges in their presence, allowing the Soma to consistently thwart the conjurations of enemy wizards and augment the powers of the Blood Naga. Elder Soma can cast spells of Dar, draining the adversary's life force and engulfing them with soul-stealing typhoons. When caught in an untenable position, the Soma can also teleport its vessel entirely to another location, though it risks damaging the container and killing everything around it in a cataclysmic explosion. The creators of the Soma Mind Creeper vessels, the Emerald Delta Marga, feel the largest number and most potent forms of these creatures. Experimenting on captured warp fire dragons, alterations have been made to allow their Soma to extract the life force of others, particularly wizards, and compress their souls into warpstone, creating a self-sustaining energy source to facilitate longer campaigns. They also concocted a serum from the Soma tank's fluid to grant limited prescience and greater regeneration to their Blood Naga and Panaga elite, aiding them greatly in their conflicts against the forces of Nippon to the east and the odd vampire incursion. And that one's pretty crazy, right? Like the Soma Mind Creeper has got so much poured into it from a lore perspective, and it's really awesome. Like this distilled vat of Slan Mage juice. Like, that is disgusting and awesome. And even taking a look at the actual Soma itself, and you can see it represented over here, it's terrifying in its own right. So I love this kind of very Cthulhu mythos style approach to this unit to make it for a very characteristic style of artillery piece. And if I kind of think of how that lore was done up, there's so many different directions you could take this, right? You could give it bound spells of dark at that very end piece, like it talks about Life Stealer or Doom Bolt being accessed from it. Or I think the actual artillery itself would be very reminiscent to a Warp Lightning cannon, right? Direct shots of Warp Lightning coming down range at you with maybe a different color, rather than just kind of being the green-yellow that is the Skaven Warp Lightning. It's maybe like a greenish black to kind of really drive home this really dark, twisted Warpstone look from Khuresh. And on top of it, I think that Mortis engine effect is a no-brainer, but I'd really like it to be different. I'd like for this to be something that has the ability to change what its AoE damage profile is, or AoE profile is. A lot of it has to do with the psyche of those that are attacking or getting close to it. So it'd be cool if you could, hey, I can press a button and in a let's just say 40-meter radius around the Soma Mind Creeper, everyone gets rampage, because it just, rather than of course them attacking themselves, which they really can't do unless they added that into Warhammer 3. I could see it just causing a general berserk rampage where you lose control of them and they attack whatever they see. But it'd be interesting if you could toggle what that AoE was. Okay, do you want it to do a leadership debuff? Do you want it to be a persistent damage like a Mortis engine effect? You can choose one or the other. And it even talks about the ability to aid the other Panaga around with helping with regenerative capabilities. So maybe if it even had a regeneration ability, kind of like the Revivification Crystal. Now, obviously, it can't have all these things. That would be broken in the scope of Total War Warhammer. But just to say, like, hey, we want to make this a different artillery piece, so it can either toggle between doing leadership or hindering leadership, or hindering melee attack, as well as doing persistent damage. And then you've got an activatable that makes everyone berserk. If it was like that, I could see that being a little bit more palatable, because it's not all three effects at once. You're choosing one or the other, and then you've got an activatable that's on like a 90-second or 120-second recast, which is probably pretty typical. And then as far as the Dar, having access to Dar, I guess that could be the Elder Soma as a Regiment of Renown. Gives them access to the Dar, which is again the Lore of Dark, and using the abilities like Soul Stealer and some other ones like what's the pain, something through pain or whatever, where you suck winds of magic from people. And when you say it, let's suck winds of magic, it sounds way more brutal than it actually is. So that ability, I think, could just be bound abilities built into the Soma Mind Creeper. Now, in addition to that, it does say, hey, you know, this is warp-infused glass, so maybe it has a high physical resistance, as a result, very low armor and melee defense, because how's it going to defend itself, really? I could see that kind of being the case. And imagine the animation for when this thing dies, right? The tank opens up, the thing sputters to the ground and spills the liquid everywhere, and the Soma kind of like falls out lifeless. That'd be a really cool animation just to see this thing die. In addition to, it talks about maybe distorting projectiles in air. So maybe that could be an ability too. Like maybe it's got just a bunch of bound abilities rather than having a lot of persistent effects. Like, okay, hey, it's got a Mortis engine effect, but then you can choose to use this bound ability, which will reduce incoming projectile fire, or give you a missile resistance buff in a what's it called? Like a 40-meter radius around you, or again, the leadership thing, the berserk thing, so on and so forth. So all these different ways to manipulate the battlefield as activatable buttons versus just a constant passive effect. And I think lastly, it would probably have like a magical foci type ability where it drains the winds of magic of the opponent and adds to yours, something of that sort. Or maybe that's reserved for the Regiment of Renown version. There are so many things in the lore here that obviously those all can't be infused into the game, but it was mainly me just talking about all the different variations of stuff that could happen, right? It even talks about like withering all their armor around them, so maybe there's a sunder effect. Clearly, like I said, you can't have all of them, but it'd be cool to just kind of be able to borrow some of them. And another cool little design note I noticed is taking a look at this head. It's very reminiscent of a Slan Mage Priest's head. Like, look at this part, like the puffy cheeks and everything. So I really like the artistic direction they took with the Soma Mind Creeper, and it is pretty spicy. But that concludes our coverage of the Brood of the Naga Queen here today, guys. Just these 2 new units. We'll probably have another one of these videos out sooner rather than later, since I was so late to make this one. But we have a lot of stuff here planned for this week. I got some fun videos for Troy, Warhammer 3 combined. Like, I want to go over some of those mechanics and how they could possibly be coming into Warhammer 3, and some other stuff here and there, as well as some goodies with Bannerlord. But as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun action. But have a good one, and take care.